Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News. Today for the first story I'm actually going to review Fox's Gotham. Now some of you might be saying, hey Grace, that's a television show and this is called Morning Movie News. But the reason I'm going to talk about Gotham today is because I think the show has so much hype and in my opinion lives up to the hype that it's going to have a direct effect on the DC cinematic universe. And I think what's going to happen is that this is going to be the Batman universe that we have for a few years. You're not going to see any more Batman movies, I would suspect, especially if this continues to go along at this rate, which again I think it will. And instead in the films, Batman will be part of a group. You'll see an exploration of the Justice League, and then Gotham and all these villains that even non-comic book readers have come to love over the years can get their fix here on Fox's Gotham. The show really is as good as everyone's been saying. As you might recall, it was named the best or the most promising new show of the fall season by television critics, and I really do think they might have picked the right show. I was really impressed with it. Now, it's by no means perfect, and it kind of exists in this weird space, but again, I think it's more than good enough in many areas that we have something potentially very special on our hands here. Now, sure, some people might be saying, oh, you know, where's our Breaking Bad style comic book television show? Where's the show that operates on that level? And you know, Gotham is not that show. And there's the comic book shows we have been getting on the CW that have pleased a number of fans. You know, there's a very strong cult fan base for Arrow, and then they're doubling down with The Flash this season. And you know, it's a very respectable fan base, a very vocal and potent one, even if it's not, the numbers aren't huge. But I, for instance, have never loved those type of shows on the CW, those superhero shows. Smallville, never liked it, not into Arrow, but I do like Gotham. Gotham exists in the middle between a really amazing cable show like Breaking Bad or Fargo, and a superhero show that you would find on the CW. And I believe this is as good a show as you can possibly get on network television. There are some of the problems of a network show here. Things move a little too quickly. I think that's one of the hallmarks of network television, a real desire to see some things, at least some storylines, wrapped up within the hour. So I think the show doesn't breathe as much as I would like it to. And then there are some of the aspects that you see in a CW show where, for instance, everybody knows everyone else. I saw a great tweet last night where someone said, Jim Gordon's the best detective ever. He's met every potential and future criminal mastermind in Gotham in just 27 minutes, and he kind of did. And you know, it's a little bit hard to believe that. You know, you really have to just have faith in the show. And I think the show is worthy of that, though, because of the things that it gets right. Now, this is a show for anyone who's always liked Jim Gordon in the comics and feels bad that Gotham Central was canceled. And I feel in many ways it's surprisingly loyal to the source material, which I really appreciated. I can't tell you how happy I was when Renee Montoya and Crispus Allen from the Major Crimes Unit walked into that diner. I was so happy to see them, and I hope their roles continue on the show. And Renee Montoya was actually fleshed out quite a bit with even her character, the way she was changed in the comics towards the end run to be a lesbian character. And then but her relationship with Barbara Kean, Jim Gordon's fiancée, makes me feel that maybe that might be our future Batwoman character, because there are similarities there. And of course, you know, I think the name is Kean in the comics, but I think it's similar enough that you might see that situation develop over there. But very, very loyal. Now, the thing that I thought was the best about what they got right about the foundation of the show were two things. One, that it's Jim Gordon versus a very corrupt city, and the only way he can survive and maybe even someday win is through compromise. I think the show did a very good job of portraying that. I also really liked the relationship that was defined between him and Bruce Wayne. I thought that was extremely compelling, and it was a partnership that was believable. I mean, sure, it was an adult and a child, but because this was such a wealthy child and, you know, the importance he would take on after his parents' death in the city, you know, the status, it all kind of made sense to me. And of course, we know what he'll eventually become in the shadows as well. So the Gordon-Bruce Wayne relationship to me, when he came to visit him at the house, that worked to me. I liked that. Also, I want to say that this was the best depiction I've ever seen of the murder of the Waynes to date outside of a comic book. It was very good. It was very powerful. And I think they're so fortunate to find this young actor to play Bruce, because I feel he has what it takes to show this sophisticated child who's who ages beyond his years due to tragedy. I think he handled his scenes quite well. So the heart of the show, in my opinion, is Jim Gordon and young Bruce Wayne, as they will come to be the heart of many Batman stories going forward. But there are a lot of other strong points in the show. There are some things that are going to take some getting used to, and then there are some things that I felt haven't yet registered. So I have my notes here, so let's discuss. Ben McKenzie is Gordon. I think he's very good in the role, but I'm still just seeing his character from Southland, which he was a very good character. He was very, very good on that show. It was a television show, I believe, started on NBC about LA police officers, and then eventually moved to, I think, TNT. Very, very good show. And he was very good on that, and so to see him here and also playing a police officer, it's hard for me not to separate the two, but I think I can get there. So what I really like, a lot of people said they thought Harvey Bullock was the breakout star of the show, and in some ways, I would agree with that. Donald Logue, I believe that's how you pronounce his name. This is the best thing I've ever seen him do. He looks great. I think he's really come into his own in terms of his look. I think he's very convincing in the role. I think he's likable, even though he's doing some despicable things. And I think this is a Harvey Bullock that I think is necessary for this show to survive. I think the old Harvey Bullock that we've been familiar with for so long just wouldn't work here. And this is a great way. I think that you see some shades of this in the Batman Earth 1 comic that Jeff Johns wrote. That's an alternate universe. And I'd like to see Harvey go this way in the comics. Also, I liked Fish Mooney. This is the best thing I've ever seen Jada Pinkett Smith do. That she was really good in the role, much better than I expected. And she even had shades of Amanda Waller, I felt, which was pretty cool. And I'm really excited to see what she does with that character. And this is a character I think you can expect to see to jump over to the comics, as many other characters have done that have worked in other media, like Harley Quinn, etc. I think in Livewire, I think Fish Mooney is another character that should make the jump, even though she's a little repetitive to Amanda Waller. It would be funny if maybe her real name was Amanda Waller and she got offered a job with the U.S. government. But very, very good work from Jada Pinkett Smith. Liked her a lot. Again, I liked Renee Montoya and Crispus Allen. I geeked out when they showed up. And then you know what I really liked? I liked the tease for the Joker. Now the rumor is that all season you'll meet different characters who could potentially be the Joker, but only one of them will. And this was a great first tease. I thought that joke that they gave about his father dying that he delivered was both funny and appalling and terrifying and perfectly in tune with the Joker's sense of humor. So I really like that. Although I think maybe that's not him, considering how squeamish he got when things got real between Fish and the Penguin. So, but I think that was a great way to go about it, and I'm excited to see who our potential Joker is. So I think that's a great game they've set up. What's going to take some getting used to for me? Alfred with an edge. He stands like a proper English butler, but he does not act or talk like one. I was surprised at how quickly he would drop the facade, like when he yells at Bruce Wayne on the roof, and I think he said, like, get your ass down off of there. I was just like, Alfred doesn't say words like that. He yells at you if you say them. So that was a really weird choice that I felt the show decided to make. So we'll see if it pays off. There's some, they're moving towards it in the comics and other media where Alfred has a military background and helps train Bruce Wayne. So maybe that's what they're going for here. But then I don't understand why he moves like a proper English butler instead of like a bodyguard. There's a disconnect between his body language and his actual language. But we'll see. So that was weird for me. Also, Barbara Kean, the Jim Gordon's fiance, wasn't crazy about her character when she was first introduced. I was like, Jim Gordon never dated a society girl. That's not Jim Gordon at all. And also, Jim Gordon's marital problems were such a big part of his character from anyone who reads the comics. But then when Renee Montoya showed up and was like, I miss you, babe, I was like, oh, good. Sarah Essen, you can show up now and nobody has to feel bad about it. Because I'm very excited to see Sarah Essen eventually pop up on the show, as she should. Then the jury's still out on a number of characters. They just introduced so much in the first hour, they just naturally couldn't do everybody. Catwoman, not sold on this actress yet. I think that she has more of a pretty look than a personality, which concerns me. Then also Penguin. A lot of people said they liked the Penguin. I thought he was a little over the top. Didn't love that character. Riddler, I did like the way he was introduced, and I liked the way he reacted when Jim Gordon solved his riddle so quickly, but he seems very similar to the Penguin to me. Those actors have a very similar look and demeanor, so that was a little bit meh. Then Ivy, I think it's funny to have the nod to Ivy, but really that was the one connection to this story, to the Batman universe, that just seemed like a stretch to me. I was like, that's too much. She's really the kid of this guy who gets killed, and why are we changing her name? And the whole background seems weird to me. I was like, is she going to be next playing on the street with someone named Harley Quinn? It was just a little too much. And then, of course, Falcone, who I liked his introduction. I like that he's talking about how it's important to have order in Gotham, but we all know that disorder is coming, anarchy, which the Batman villains bring to the city. But I thought Falcone was well used, and I'm interested about his character, but not much to go on in this show. Overall, really enjoyed it. Think very highly of it. It's one of the best comic book shows on television that I've ever seen, and I think if Gotham can keep this up, it's going to be not only a very popular show with comic book fans, but the general public, and could be something that's a really exciting asset for Warner Brothers and DC. I'm very, very excited about it. So, all right, so that's the first story of the day. The next two stories are going to be short because I think they're both bad ideas. For instance, a PG-13 Deadpool movie? Bad idea. Because Deadpool fans like their character for his humor and his violence, mixed together in the perfect martini that is definitely shaken and not stirred. And to remove one ingredient when there's only two, I think would just make the film a non-starter for Fox, which would be silly because it's become so instantly, as soon as it was announced. It was important to fans even before it was announced, but now that it's been made official with the release date for 2016, it is a huge shining beacon of hope on Fox's slate of Marvel films. So I think it's really important to give the fans what they want. Now, I can understand the desire to make a PG-13 Deadpool film. It would potentially do better at the box office, it would have a wider demographic that could go see it, etc., etc., etc. All the reasons that Hollywood makes PG-13 movies today. It's the business plan. But I think Deadpool is an exception to the rule because the character, I think, simply won't work as PG-13. Even if Fox thinks they've cracked it, they've found a way to make it work as a PG-13 film, which is where this rumor has come from, that apparently they feel they do, I would warn them that they do not. And I hope that they're having some Deadpool fans read this script, just to double check, because I think Deadpool is a very interesting and odd character. I don't even quite get his appeal, so I think you really need to go directly to the source and see if it works for the fan base that enjoys him so much. Because if they don't want to go see the movie, there's no way you're going to get mainstream moviegoers to give it a shot. So a PG-13 film, again, I understand why they're trying to do it, but they have this small budget of about $50 million. Just go and make a great R-rated movie and have something that is a cult hit. Because even if it isn't a huge box office hit, I think you have a lot of merchandising potential here, a ride, all kinds of exciting things that you could do with Deadpool. Just look what Marvel Comics does with the character. He's used so ubiquitously across the board. I really think that this film needs to be R-rated. So I'm curious to what you guys think. Simon Kinberg in the past has said it's going to be R. And Simon Kinberg, of course, is very heavily involved in Fox's Marvel properties, particularly the X-Men. I got the chance to interview him. He really cares a lot about the material from what I could tell from our discussion. And he has said it's going to be an R. But who knows? He might end up being overruled by the suits. But I think this Deadpool movie can only take so many strikes against it before fans just say, you know what, I'm out. So hopefully this is just a rumor, because I think it's not a good idea. All right, so what's the other bad idea of the day? That is Joseph Gordon-Levitt playing Edward Snowden for Oliver Stone. Now, I think it's pretty good casting, although I saw someone on a message board say that Daniel Radcliffe would make a better Edward Snowden, and to which I would say, good idea. Not only because I think he physically looks more like Edward Snowden in real life, but because I think the movie that would result in an Edward Snowden film is right in Daniel Radcliffe's wheelhouse. The kind of film that gets a lot of critical attention, everyone says he's very good in it, but no one goes to see it. That's kind of the movie that Daniel Radcliffe makes these days, right? Joseph Gordon-Levitt, I think, is someone who's supposed to have somewhat graduated to a higher level of box office performance, and is not. He has not. I think there's a disconnect between how the media and fans see him and how his actual box office numbers show up. He was in Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight Rises. That was supposed to be a big step forward for him, and I think it really hasn't materialized. He has the Sandman project he's working on. He has this Christmas movie with Seth Rogen coming up. I think that it would just be a step backward for him to make this Edward Snowden film. Why do I think that? Hey, Oliver Stone is a very successful and respected director. He has some misses, but he has some really solid hits. And Edward Snowden is the film that Oliver Stone would love to make. It's in his wheelhouse. but just like Daniel Radcliffe, so that's why I think they would be a good match on this one. But Joseph Gordon-Levitt, I don't think he can take another box office hit, and I think no matter how good an Edward Snowden film is, I think there simply isn't an audience for it. I think he might sell books, I think he might sell magazines, but I don't think he's going to sell a movie ticket. I think that just isn't how people want to spend their evening. I think he'd be better off an Edward Snowden story on a paid cable network, like an HBO movie. I think that would be have a better shot at succeeding and getting an audience than a movie. I mean, The Fifth Estate wasn't a great film, but still, there was no interest in the story of Julian Assange from the general public, and there wasn't much of an interest from awards either. And I think maybe you could argue that's because the film wasn't that great, but I just think maybe it's too soon. I think that there isn't a compelling product to produce here. We'll see, though. We'll see how an Edward Snowden film does. They have some interesting angles they could approach. They're saying they're either going to do, the actual stealing of the top secret classified information and the dispersal of it, or they might do a story about Edward Snowden trying to get asylum outside of the United States so that he's not arrested for treason. A couple different interesting angles. I would say that the latter is better than the former. I think the asylum angle could make it seem a little more fresh and take some of the focus off of whether or not he's a traitor or not. Because, I think that this country, I would suspect, is still pretty divided on that. And even if you don't feel he's a traitor, I don't know if you want to spend 2 hours of your time with him in a movie theater when you're supposed to be there to be entertained. Even if it's in a compelling award season type way, it's supposed to be really compelling. And maybe Oliver Stone has too many strikes against him at this point, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt just isn't enough a draw anyway, even on his own. He doesn't need to be associated with a film that people don't want to see for other reasons besides apparently him being in it. He needs to get more hits. So those are the 3 stories of the day. Now on to the viewer question. This is from Jorge Hugo Lopez Lesca. And Jorge has been extremely patient with this question and has asked me several times for a couple of weeks now. And you've probably seen his question in the comment section because it's pretty long. And the reason it took me so long to answer it is because it's a pretty serious question, and I wanted to really give it some thought to make sure I gave what I felt was an accurate answer. So Jorge says, "Hi Grace, it would mean the world to me if you could answer my question. I'm originally from Mexico, and to my recent surprise, I found that a lot of advertisements are done in Mexico. Usually places that American audiences aren't aware exist due to the general stereotypes found in a lot of American media. Things like villages in the desert or crime-filled streets, those are the stereotypes he's referring to. And I'm quite aware that other races are depicted in this way too. For instance, I believe in some other incarnations of this question, he pointed out the way Asia is often portrayed. So Jorge continues saying, so my question to you is, why doesn't American media depict other provinces in the world with a more realistic perspective, instead of stereotyping from a lack of actual knowledge? Thanks, and love the channel." Great question, Jorge. And I think that the reason stems from the fact that right now, American media and American, storytelling, Hollywood, the entertainment industry, simply isn't telling realistic stories about other parts of the world. They're only, being shown in the way they relate to the stories that are being told, and that's as a vacation destination. The stereotypes that we're also familiar with. It's kind of a shorthand. Hollywood uses shorthand all the time in many different ways, not just with different nationalities and ethnicities, to, just save themselves some time in the storytelling process. And I think it comes from an innocent place. I don't think they're always aware of some of the damage they might be doing. But I think that the only way that this is going to change, Jorge, is if you see better and more realistic stories told about these places that's not trying to just play into what is ripped from the headlines and what Americans are already hearing. For instance, there are some very good films. For instance, what springs to mind is Maria Full of Grace. Great movie. Talks about a very real situation with drug trafficking, but I'm sure you're wondering, as being from Mexico, that's not all Mexico is. Where's the other aspects that are not being portrayed? Well, I would say Canteen Floss, the recent film that came out from Mexico's own film industry about Mario Moreno's rise to stardom, was very good, and I think showed a very good side of Mexico. But of course, it wasn't current day. And I don't know much about Mexican politics, but I do know it's a difficult situation, and that's the only headlines that we're really getting over here. So the only way this is going to change, if more people from these countries, and even people who are have a background from these countries who come to live in the United States or have ancestors, etc., if those people start getting into the storytelling process. For instance, look at Shonda Rhimes. She had a big problem with the New York Times in that they labeled How to Get Away with Murder, her new Viola Davis show, as about being about an angry black woman. And the New York Times reporter or reviewer said, well, I was meant that in a positive way, about how you're changing that stereotype, or embracing it and using it in a powerful, positive way. And Shonda Rhimes was like, I don't want you to use that stereotype at all. But Shonda Rhimes is a good example. I haven't watched the show yet. It debuts on Thursday. But she's a good example of someone who is like, well, I'm not just going to complain about the way black women are portrayed in the media. I'm going to do something about it. And she's created this wonderful character played by Kerry Washington over on Scandal. And now she's trying to do the same with Viola Davis. So until you see talent, and it's going to have to be, I think, talent in the same demographic as the change they want to see, because they have the most invested in it. Until that talent goes and tells the stories that aren't, just ripped from the headlines, and digs in and exposes American audiences to the non-stereotypical situations, the stereotypes will just continue to exist. And that's it's just the way things are. It's just the way things have always been in many different regards, many different industries. And that's why, you have to see this. You have to see this evolution. And I'm going to be reviewing Revenge of the Green Dragons later this week, and that's a film about Asian immigrants in New York City. And I thought that was really a refreshing film because it wasn't a martial arts movie, and it just was a realistic depiction of an actual situation that happens here in the United States to this demographic. And I thought it was very well done in that regard. So that's a good instance of a change that's taking place. So someone from Mexico, Jorge, and maybe it will be you, needs to go and tell these stories that aren't being told about Mexico, and show the different side that you see, but that you feel isn't being represented to the media, and through the media, and through entertainment industry. So thank you so much for your question, Jorge. I hope my answer was helpful to you. It's a very sophisticated and complicated question, so thank you for that. And it takes some thought. So I hope, even if I couldn't answer you as much as you would like, I hope that the solution that I proposed is inspirational to you, or gives you some hope for what you might see down the line. All right, thank you so much to everybody for tuning in. Please write down what you thought of today's top 3 stories and the viewer question, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.